So in 1.5, we're talking about market research. And market research is kind of going in line with our statistics focus in this chapter. And it's a way for businesses to determine the viability of a product. So determine viability. So that could be things like in terms of price, right? Is this product too expensive for what the market would want to pay for it? Is this even a product that people would be interested in buying? Is this as quality of a product as I think it is? So they conduct market research to do that. And when they're conducting this research, we usually focus on some sort of a target group, right? I'm not going to survey just everybody on the planet. I'm going to focus on a specific group that I'm marketing this product to. And usually that's called a demographic. Right, and we've seen this word demographic just kind of around in life, right? Demographics can be any sort of kind of label on the population, right? This could be based on age, right? I could look at people that are maybe 24 to 35. Um, this could be by location. Maybe I just want to survey people in Rhode Island. This could be, or in New England. This could be by race or ethnicity. This could be by gender. This could be by religion. Maybe I just want to survey Catholics. Maybe I just want to survey non-Catholics. Right? Any sort of thing. Or maybe it's not even based on that. It could just be by interest. I want to survey people who like football. I want to survey people with master's degree. Um, Teachers, right? Any sort of way I can like label or group my population based on a common thread would be our demographic. Well, it doesn't make sense if I stick with maybe the population of, I don't know, of Catholics. So maybe my Catholics. It doesn't make sense to survey every single Catholic on the planet. That's a lot of people. So that's my population, right? This is just a group I'm interested in studying. So a group we are interested in studying further. So maybe I'm going to look at changes in mass attendance during the pandemic, for example. Well, again, it doesn't make sense for me to survey every single Catholic. So I'm going to take a subset of that population, and we're going to call that subset a sample. So maybe I just take, I don't know, 2,000 Catholics, just 2,000 Catholics. Any sort of other label, right? If I were to change this to like 2,000 US Catholics, well, that's a whole different demographic. So we just want to talk about a specific number of people or units in that population. The population does not necessarily have to be a person. For market research, it typically is. But if I think about quality control, right, I might want I might want to sample from a batch of calculators. I might want to sample from a batch of yogurt. Like it's whatever broad thing that you want to investigate, that's your population. And the big question we look at here is how do we actually come up with a sample of the population that is what we call a representative sample, something that fairly I don't know, fairly represents, for unfortunately using the word in the definition, I guess, my population. I want to make sure this is a fair picture, fair snapshot of my population. So there are three different ways we can create a sample. The first is a simple random sample, and that's just where everyone, I'm going to use a different color, where everybody has an equal chance of being selected. Everyone is equally likely to be selected. And I might just do this with maybe some kind of drawing. I put names in a hat. I could use a random number generator. Anything that allows me to just completely randomly select however many people I need. So this is my population again. Then I just take whatever group of people I need or things I need to create my sample, just directly from the population, grab them all, done. Well, that's great, but this introduces the question of, well, making sure that I'm really getting a good representation here. Well, in order to maybe make sure I'm covering all my bases, I have what we call a stratified random sample. And we start by splitting the population into what we call non-overlapping groups. And we would call those strata. So non-overlapping groups, maybe if I'm looking at all Catholics again, maybe my non-overlapping groups are by continent, right? I don't have anybody that lives on multiple continents at the same time, so maybe I look at North America, look at South America, I look like at Europe and so on, right? An overlapping group would maybe be like people that have attended this parish, right? I can maybe go to a couple different churches. So non-overlapping groups, nobody lives on multiple continents at the same time, so maybe this is the way to go. So from my population, I'm going to start by splitting it into some number of groups. Right, so these are my strata here. And then from those strata, I do a simple random sample on each group. So from them, I take some number of things from each strata. Done. So this in green would be my sample population, or just my sample. So split them into non-overlapping groups, and this way I make sure I'm covering all my bases. If we were to think about like a school, the easiest set of non-overlapping groups would be to split by grade, right? Survey 10 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 10 juniors, 10 seniors, right? I don't have any student that is both a freshman and a sophomore. Done. Convenience samples are the trickiest. We're just going to take whoever or whatever because they're the easiest to access, so that are most easily accessible. So if I if I stick with my Catholic example, maybe I just survey people at my parish. If I stick with my school example, I teach seniors, maybe I just survey my students. You can already imagine that this maybe creates some kind of problem. We're going to talk about that problem shortly. But for a really quick example first, suppose I'm the mayor of a town, and I'm going to put together a committee of 50 people so we can really talk through events. Maybe it's a big town. Well, a random sample would just be literally randomly select 50 names, right? Maybe I assign each name a number. So I look at like the tax records, and I'm like, everybody gets a number, and I randomly select numbers 1, 10, 250, 375, and so on until I have all my people. If I wanted a stratified sample of my 50-member town committee, maybe I do it by neighborhood. Maybe I pick 10 people per neighborhood, or district, or zip code, or whatever. Right, so maybe I have 5 neighborhoods, and I pick 10 from here, 10 from here, 10 from here, 10 from here, 10 from here. Well, in that way, what's good about this is it makes sure every neighborhood is getting equal representation, and that's one of the more fair ways to do it. The last one, the convenience sample, maybe I just talked to 50 people I last saw, maybe 50 people that last emailed me, maybe 50 people that I just the first 50 people that walked through the town hall, whatever, right? So those are kind of the 3 different sampling methods that we're going to focus on and talk about. Well, as I mentioned, some of these might show what we call bias. And bias is a tendency to overstate or downplay, either way, a particular part of the population. Right, so for example, if I wanted to sample the whole student body, but I just talked to freshmen, right? Well, then I'm not talking to the juniors and the seniors and the sophomores. There are three different forms of bias. The first is bias in the question design. So the first is bias in the question design. And these could come in a few different forms. The biggest form, of course, is the wording. So the biggest form of this is if I ask some kind of a question and I just give you the option for yes or no, but there's a third possible option that's maybe both, or there's a fourth possible option that's neither. So maybe I ask you, I don't know, do you like Pepsi or do you like Coke? And I say, your only options are to pick, I like Pepsi or I like Coke. Well, personally speaking, I don't like either. So if I were asked, do you like Pepsi or do you like Coke, and I was forced to pick one, I wouldn't know how to answer the question, and I'd probably just randomly pick one because I don't like either equally as much. Maybe some people are like, I just like them both, and they want that option of both. But not having that both or neither option when it's logical to have it can bias the question. So that would be one example. Another example would be what we call loaded questions. And these are, you see these all the time in political polls. And that would be including some sort of adjective that implies support or not support, I guess, or being against whatever you're asking about, against the topic, I'll say. So that would be, I don't know, if you look at this election, right? This would be like having a question that says, do you support the awful things that this candidate is doing? Do you support the great things that this candidate is doing? By using adjectives like awful and great in this last example that I just kind of said, these are charged. These are now emotionally charged. So these words, right, have already discredited the question because they start to already get you to think a certain way. If you think the policies are great, you'd be like, yeah, I think they're great. If you don't think they're great, you're like, well, why are you saying they're great, right? You automatically start to question the validity of the survey. So it's important to be neutral as possible, right? You want to be neutral. And the best way to be neutral is just to say, do you support the policies? Period. Done. Right? There's no inkling either way which way you're thinking because you're just saying, do you support X? Yes or no? So the next form of bias is bias by the respondent. And this one is maybe a little more obvious than you might think. The simple principle behind it really is, it comes down to personal questions, right? We want to be careful with personal questions. Things like weight, people have a tendency to actually answer lower than is true, maybe sometimes higher, depending on their weight, their perception of themselves. Things like salary, sometimes also height, people have a tendency to overplay and increase, again, maybe, or decrease depending on who they're talking to. But typically, people tend to downplay their weight and overstate their salary, or overstate something like their height. Right? We want to be careful with personal questions because we might not feel comfortable answering them. Additionally, any sort of personal connection to the study or to the person asking the question can also bias the result, just because of that personal, that different relationship. You really want somebody who's completely, preferably neutral and a stranger to the person that you're studying. The last form we're going to talk about is non-response bias. And non-response bias is not necessarily the study's fault, the market research group's fault. This is just a case where part of the demographic, part of the sample, part of, I'll say the demographic, just doesn't respond. And whether that's they don't respond to the survey or they don't show any reaction to a treatment or to some kind of experiment, Well, what this does is the data is no longer representative of the population, no longer representative of the population. Well, this is a problem. Like I said, if I ask the whole student body, right, 9, 10, 11, and 12th grade, and only ninth grade responds, well, great. That's no longer representative of my entire my entire population. That's just a really good now representation of ninth grade. Well, what this leads to then, so suppose maybe I had like one sophomore respond and two juniors and like two seniors and 100 freshmen, right? Well, that now leads to what we call undercoverage, where we're getting responses, but there's inadequate representation, and that is a problem, right? That's going to bias my results, representation, because it either overstates or underplays, and in this case, overstates the freshman, downplays the upperclassmen, and it's no longer a fair representation of our sample. As a rule, the sample size should be as large as possible. You should study as many people as you can. In a perfect world, you should survey the entire population, because it means that your results are going to be much more accurate to the whole population, the more people from that population that you survey.